The question I get asked a lot is whether you should get a triathlon bike or a road bike when you're new into triathlon and undecided. So what this video is all about today is me sharing my opinions on whether you should go for a road bike or triathlon bike if you can't get both. When I first started, I couldn't get both, so I started on a road bike, and I'm going to talk to you about the different splits that I got at different races, and some of those were on a triathlon bike, some of them were on a road bike. My first video, my introduction into the triathlon channel, you'll see that I spoke about I've gone through a lot of bikes in my time. So if you haven't seen that, I started triathlon 3 years ago, and in those 3 years I've gone through 9 bikes. You're going to see each one individually, and I'll talk about sort of why I went with that bike initially, and then how I performed in races on that particular bike. So when I originally started, I got the cheapest, sort of, I'll say the cheapest, it was a cheap package from UK. I think it was between 600 or 800, but it included a bike, shoes, helmet, wetsuit, literally a beginner's kit into triathlon. And I thought that would be more than enough to see me through Ironman Bolton, which was the one I'd signed up for originally, and it was a bucket list for me, and that was going to be the end of triathlon, so I thought anyway. So I had that Giant, as you can see in the picture. It wasn't carbon or anything, it was just an aluminium frame. It was, like I say, very basic, but I thought it would do the job, and I'm sure it would have done the job. It wasn't until later on that I sort of got more into cycling, and I decided that I wanted to sort of go up a level on bike anyway. So I opted for the Giant Propel, which you can see here, and that was a great bike. A very good entry-level carbon bike. It had everything I thought I needed. Promised my wife that that would be the bike that would see me through Ironman Bolton, and I wouldn't need to get any other bikes from there. So that one lasted probably 6 months. I then was driving past a Giant shop one day, and I saw this red Giant in the window. As you can see in the pictures, it's very eye-catching, and I knew then that was the bike that was going to see me through. So I ended up getting that one. I did sell the other ones, just to make that clear as well. So it wasn't like I was building up a stock of bikes now. I sold them, got the red Giants, like I said, promised my wife that would be it. And I loved that bike. It had disc wheels, it had bigger rims on the wheels as well. So I just thought everything about it, for me, the color, it was just an amazing bike, and it really was. So my first race was a UK triathlon race in Whitchurch, and it was 70.3, and the Giant was the bike that was going to see me through that race. And my bike split for the 56 miles was 2 hours 57:33. So that was my very first triathlon as well, and it was just before, a few weeks before Bolton, so it was a good tester for me. So to be honest, at that stage I didn't really know what was considered a great time or a good time, acceptable time for a bike split. I was just happy that it was under 3 hours. I think for me at that time, that was the goal, was to get under 3 hours, and I did. So I thought that put me on a good level to go into Bolton. So then moving on to Bolton, I still had the Giant, and the bike split there was 5 hours 37. But just to make that clear as well, if you were in Bolton at 2018, there was a reduced bike because of the fires, and it was 102 miles, I think it was at the time. So that bike split was just short of the 112, but it was 5:37. Again, sticking with the Giants, I went to Ironman Weymouth 70.3, and I mean the conditions were horrible, but the bike split was 3 hours flat on that one. Still really happy with the bike and with the overall performance on that. So I actually decided after that to get a triathlon bike, or TTbike, and you can see in here it was a Cannondale Slice that I got, and it was actually a good deal that my brother got from a guy at work that was selling it. Had lovely wheels on it. It was a triathlon bike, and it was sort of everything I thought I needed at the time, and like I said, it was a great price. I think I got it for £1,000, which was brilliant at the time. So I got that bike, super excited, still having the Giant at that stage, and now I am starting to build up a stock of bikes. But that bike never saw a race. Unfortunately, I was building up to Florida and I was on the turbo trainer, and my wife had swapped her bike onto the turbo trainer. Then when she put mine back on, didn't put the skewer through correctly, so it wasn't actually on. I then got up to get out the bike to do an interval, a bit of a sprint, but off the seat, and I fell over and I actually cracked the back of the bike, so all the carbon had shattered. We're now talking a month away from going to Florida. Luckily I had insurance, so if you don't have insurance, I'd recommend getting insurance, because they were brilliant and they actually covered everything. So I had to take it to some place in London where they were going to try and fix it. I spoke to them, they then said it's going to be probably 6 to 8 weeks. I needed it back in 4. They said, well, to be fair, they didn't even know if it could be repaired, so they wrote it off and the insurance paid me out. But at that stage I was looking at a Canyon, spoke to Canyon, and they wouldn't get one to me in time, because something to do with they had to swap the brake levers, I think it was at the time, because they're the wrong way around. They come out of Germany differently apparently. So I asked them to send it, I didn't care, just send it how it was, but they couldn't for whatever reason it was. So I actually ended up going to Florida again on my Giant, on the Propel disc one, so the nice red one, which was great. And it was a bike split, so it was 70.3 again, a bike split of 2 hours 42 minutes. So that was great. I then, whilst in Florida, on eBay, I managed to find a Canyon, and that was the bike I'd really wanted from Canyon prior to going to Florida. It again was a really good deal, so I got it second hand. It was, I think at the time, 1,800 quid that I ended up getting it for. So when I arrived back from Florida, I came home to a Canyon, and I loved that bike, and it was actually, to this day, probably one of my most favorite bikes. So it looked great, it was quick, it was just a bike I really wanted. And the first race I got to do on that was in Lisbon, so Challenge Lisbon, and I did a bike split of 2 hours 45. So that was the first time I'd ever ridden a TT bike. I think prior to that I'd been out, because of the timings when I got it and getting it fitted to me, and then going to Lisbon was within a week. So I'd actually only ever ridden a TT bike for about 5-10 miles max just before I went, just to make sure I could do it. So I actually went there without ever being on a TT bike, so I was quite nervous. I probably held back a little bit as well. So I was also very injured at that stage, and that's a different story, and I probably should never have gone to that race in hindsight. So that was the Canyon's first outing. I then took it to Ironman Staffordshire, and I got a bike split of 2 hours 49. Again, just to put that into perspective, I was really injured in that race as well. Although I had a really good bike, I had huge mechanical problems during the bike. So I don't know exactly what happened. I think someone tampered with my bike. I complained to Ironman. Apparently they had a few issues as well. But the bars, I went over the first hump coming out of the transition, and the TT bars fell straight down. So they had loosened all the screws. So then I also didn't have my tools. They were taken out of the front. A lesson learned, I shouldn't have left them in there overnight, but they were gone. So I actually couldn't, I had to hold one bar like that whilst resting on it while holding the other one, just to make sure that we didn't drop. So one, it was very dangerous. So I went through that whole race really nervous that I was going to go over the bars, which I nearly did on the initial finding of the bars being loose. So a lesson learned again is just make sure when you go in the morning, just check everything, make sure all the screws and everything are there, and also you've got your tools, but they're all tightened up. So something I do prior to the race, but I should have checked it in the morning again. So lesson learned, like I say, but a decent bike split on that bike, considering the circumstances. But weighing all that up, if you look at it, the best bike came from Ironman Florida at 242. So you could argue the road bike was really well, it is the quickest bike split that I've had, and that was on a road bike. So hopefully that helps you to answer any question that you did have, that whether you're deciding whether it's a TT bike or a road bike. One other thing I would add on the having a TT bike or over a road bike, you're very limited to what you can do. If you're thinking of doing any cycling events, you can't do those on the TT bike. So any sportives or anything you want to do, you can't do them on a TT bike. It has to be a road bike. So especially when I was initially starting up and I was trying to build up confidence on the bike, because I'd never ridden a bike before, especially clips in with cleats. So I entered a lot of wiggle events just to build up confidence and riding, maybe not necessarily as a group because you can't do that in a race, but just getting out there in the open road and really doing the miles on them, because some of them were over 100-mile rides, and like I say, just building up the confidence. But had I only had a TT bike, I wouldn't have been able to do those. And also I think, just for me anyway, being on the open road, I don't always necessarily like going down into the TT position because there's traffic and everything, and again, I'm quite nervous on the roads anyway. I'd rather sit on the turbo than go out on the roads, but being on the road is very important. So hopefully that maybe clears up some sort of doubts or questions that you might have. If you have got any other questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. Please like and subscribe so we can reach more people. Really appreciate that. And thank you to everyone that has already subscribed, and for the comments. It's been really positive so far, so I really appreciate that. And thanks for watching.